Hey everyone, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host G1. As always, I hope you are having a good week. We don't have anything to talk about this week. Nothing's going on. So we're just going to talk about basket weaving. What a heck of a week we've had. What could be the real spark that kicks off World War III has begun in the Middle East. And, I'm throwing that out there, I guess, maybe a little sensational. People say that or have said that multiple times about conflicts in the Middle East. But this one may prove to be the one. And that's going to be our topic for the day. But I'm going to try to drill down into something that is more specific than just that general conflict itself, because there's something more going on here at the beginning that you need to be thinking about and spreading to people that you know. And I'm speaking, of course, of media manipulation or propaganda manipulation. This is something that we have been long exposed to, but it is in full speed mode the last few days as this conflict unfolds. Before we get too deep into that, I want to state some things out of the gate here so that I'm not misunderstood. To begin, I want to give you my stance on this conflict overall. I do not support either side. I'm neutral in this, much like my stance about Ukraine. This is not my fight. This is not really my business. So know that before I talk critically about the opposing sides in this. I'm not choosing one over the other. But that said, however, just like with Ukraine, I believe that both sides in this are guilty of bad behavior. I believe that bad behavior has contributed to the escalation of the brutality of this conflict. And more relevant, I believe that the West, and the U.S. in particular, are supporting one side that is significantly creating conditions that increase that brutality even more. So while I'm critical of both sides, I really reserve my harshest criticism for the West, for the U.S. and NATO or European countries, for making this worse. You have the bad behavior by the particular actors, but when the larger countries with greater sway and greater pull allow things to happen, they allow one country to conduct itself in such a manner that they are critical of the other side for doing, well, then you're clearly taking a side, and you're promoting and provoking this thing into greater realms, greater areas. The U.S. is enabling this conflict and enabling something that we would launch a war against any other country for doing the same thing. And I'll get into the why that I think is at play there after we touch on this manipulation aspect that are taking place in the information warfare axis of this conflict. To be fair, both sides of this understand the information war aspects, and they utilize the media and the propaganda to drive the narrative. The Palestinians do this. We've seen them fake videos and things like that in the past. So both sides do this. It's honestly something that you should be studying so that you can see it happening to you and recognize it when it's taking place. But in Western media, however, the Israeli side takes precedent, and their story is presented as almost 100% factual, while the Palestinian side is given harsher framing and maybe greater skepticism, I guess is how you could put that. Because the media will not necessarily say that everything the Palestinians say is wrong. They just present it in such a manner that kind of makes it seem like they're skeptical of it. But they have been guilty of putting out these manufactured videos and manufactured outrage that the Palestinians have put together themselves. So they're not completely on one side, but they do certainly lean to one side more than the other. And that's just the state of Western media. After the last 7 years, you're more than aware of that and how it works. So I don't feel like we need to dig too deep into that, other than to just mention it so that you kind of know the conditions of this information battlefield here. But let's recap a minute so we're on the same page about all of this. Saturday, October the 7th, during a Jewish holiday, Hamas launches a series of raids into Israeli-held territory originating from the Gaza Strip. And operationally, this was done for three main goals, at least as kind of we can determine. One being to inflict terror on population, cause chaos and disruption, and the third being to capture hostages. And it appears that the capture of hostages was really the key component, the key operational goal, and it was done in order to provoke a significant military response from the IDF. The most likely course of action for Hamas is that they have done this to draw the IDF into a protracted ground operation in that dense urban terrain of Gaza, which it maximizes the capabilities of Hamas, and it restricts the IDF from a technological and manpower standpoint. It reduces their advantages. This is very much a new iteration of the same tactic or same operational aspect that was put into play by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon back in, if I recall correctly, it was 2006 when Israel went into southern Lebanon and really got its butt handed to it by Hezbollah. So this seems like the latest sort of iteration of that on the part of Hamas. At this point, I believe that you all have seen video and photographic images that show the results of these raids. What you may not have seen is the video and photographic images of the initial IDF response, because one aspect of the Hamas attacks were massive rocket barrages on Israeli population centers, and so the IDF seems to be responding to that by launching mass air and artillery strikes on the urban areas of Gaza. These attacks are said by the IDF to be targeting Hamas leadership and their logistical targets. However, those targets are in civilian apartment buildings. This has resulted in a significant number of Palestinian civilians being killed or maimed, which is partly on the fault of the Hamas for putting those targets in those structures. But when you have a territory that consists primarily of urban and suburban terrain, that's probably where you're going to have to put them. At any rate, additionally, Hezbollah, which operates out of southern Lebanon, also conducted a number of rocket attacks from its areas after the initial attacks from Hamas took place. And this prompted a diplomatic response from the Biden administration stating that if Hezbollah were to expand the conflict, that the U.S. would join the fight with Israel. In a tit-for-tat kind of announcement, Iran responds by stating that if the U.S. entered the conflict directly, that Iran would begin to conduct operations itself from bases in Syria, and Iraq, and Lebanon. Now, since these announcements have been made, we have seen several things happen, and this gets us kind of into where I want to focus on, so bear with me here. First, we saw the U.S. media talking heads, celebrities, and the Uniparty, meaning both Dems and Republicans, falling all over themselves to support Israel and demand U.S. military action. There is resounding support among the boomer class and the Uniparty for action, with some going so far as to profess that we should unilaterally attack Iran because they must have supported this. We saw reports come out very, very quickly after this that Iran had given the go-ahead for this operation by Hamas in a meeting that took place in, I believe it was Beirut, about a month ago. Well, how do we know that? No one bothered to really ask that. How did we know that's what they discussed at that meeting? We learned today that an Iranian convoy was hit in Iraq, or what was called an Iranian convoy, and also that a strike on an airport in Damascus was launched by the Israeli Air Force, and that strike hit just minutes before a very high-ranking Iranian official was said to be landing. Now, the strike did not hit the Iranian plane, but that seems to be just, an error in timing there, a little bit of unluckiness, if you would. So this is where we are, but what I want to focus on is that media manipulation job that is being worked on us here, because over the last 2 days, we've been inundated with this story about one of the Hamas attacks on an Israeli kibbutz, and that's a collective farm, if you're not aware, like a small communist agricultural center. Maybe they would just call it communal, but it's communist. Hamas raided one of these areas and took a number of hostages and killed many people there. Now that part is not in question. Okay, that video is out there. Some of it was from security cameras from the main entrance, the main part of the farm there, and some of it was from Hamas themselves. They released some video showing them going in there and fighting it out with some of the people there. But what we have been told, what the media grabbed onto, is a report that was sent out that during this attack, Hamas killed 40 infants, and some of them by decapitation. And the Western media swooped in on this report, and they echoed it all over mainstream media, flooded social media with it. Hamas, they are brutal, savage baby killers. These are terrible terrorists, so on and so forth. We've seen some of the most violent statements come out of the talking heads as a result of these reports. We have people who will tell you that when we're talking about America, that any restraint on immigration, any talk of racial groups or crime or racial groups in the economy, anything at all to do with race, these people will call you the most vile things in the world and tell you till they are blue in the face that there is only one race and that we cannot tolerate any kind of talk about deportation or criminal punishment or anything like that. You can't get anywhere near that kind of topic from those people. But those people, the very same ones, will now tell you that the people of Gaza deserve to be obliterated. They deserve to be driven into the sea. They deserve to be rounded up and deported. And where do they want to deport them to? Not Jordan, not Egypt or another Muslim country. No. They want them to be deported to Europe. So we're supposed to believe that suddenly, when we're talking about Israel, that what the UN defines as genocide is perfectly fine for Israel to do to Palestine. It's totally normal, it's expected, and it's moral for Israel to defend itself by eradicating a people and forcing the survivors, who they claim are savages, to go live in Europe. Now, why would Europe be the place to deposit savages? You can answer that question yourself, by the way. So the media grabs this story about dead infants and blares it out across every platform, and it's blatantly obvious what this is for. This is targeted at bleeding hearts and ignorant Christians in Europe and the U.S. to garner support for what Israel is about to do. They're going to unleash that genocide. This is propaganda manipulation that goes back to at least World War I. We were told that the Germans were butchering children in Belgium at the beginning of World War I to broaden that conflict and draw other countries in. Now, propaganda, you say? Yes, because no one has seen these dead babies that this report talks about. This was a report from an Israeli source of questionable validity. I have seen people say and reports say that it was a news service, and I will confess I don't know much about Israeli news services and news companies and groups. It's a foreign country. You're not having that level and that detail of knowledge about them is to be expected. Not having that information, but anyway, it's of questionable validity. What I have seen is that this particular service that originated this report is heavily connected with the IDF, and that the original source for this report was a man who leads an anti-Palestinian settler movement. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. Like I said, I'm mentioning it just to say that we have to put some caution onto that. Okay, but it's enough that we have to demand further evidence and proof of these kinds of allegations. But of course, demanding proof of what Israel says, according to some of the midwit talking heads, is tantamount to questioning the Holocaust. No, you can't see the evidence. What are you, some kind of anti-Semite? Just trust us, bro. Yeah, sorry. You guys don't exactly have the track record for that. No one has seen these pictures, other than maybe Joe Biden. He claims he's seen them. I don't know. 40 dead children. And the IDF even says, oh, well, we don't need to release those pictures because they were horrible. But then momentum started to shift, and people started to ask questions and say, wait a minute, you're saying that this happened, this horrible event happened, and you're using that to demand and justify others get involved, but you're not going to show us anything. You're not going to actually show the pictures. Well, this morning, some pictures with no context at all were released. Those pictures were bad. Okay, they are bad. However, as I said, they have no context. They are pictures of 3 dead children in a morgue. At least it appears to be a morgue, a hospital setting of some sort. And they are obviously burned, but that is all that we can tell from them. And as horrible and traumatic as those are to see, those pictures could be from 2 years ago. They could have been a house fire that 3 children tragically lost their lives in. They could be from another country. We don't know, because there's no way to tell anything from them. There is no temporal context, if you will. Now, I'm not someone who likes gore or whatnot. I don't go out and look for that stuff. I will see those kind of things because I think it is important to witness them. However, I don't seek them out. I don't go looking for them. And, there are times that I have seen videos that say, warning, graphic content. Okay, not going to watch that. Don't need to see that right now. But what I will tell you is that over the last few days, I have watched live streams from cameras pointed at Gaza. And I have seen IDF bombs and artillery shells striking residential apartment buildings in relentless waves, 20 to 30 minute intervals, where you're just getting round after round or bomb after bomb falling. And within hours of that, you go to Telegram, and on Telegram channels, you will see what is obviously the results of those strikes. And you can tell by the buildings, the surroundings, that these are recent videos. This is related to the strike that just took place. And in those videos, I have seen numerous civilians maimed and obviously dead. Horrible, graphic, terrible injuries. And among them have been at least a dozen children that I have seen. There may be more. That's just what I've seen. So we don't have any evidence of these dead Israeli children. And mind you, that is a good thing, okay? That's not something that we want to see. We don't want there to be 40 dead children. But we do have ample evidence of dead Palestinian children. But this is the evidence that is supposed to be enough to outrage you for you to commit your children and your wealth to supporting yet another war in the Middle East. And this war looks to be a war of annihilation that will involve an Israeli ground offensive into Gaza. And it will be epic and devastating, and the huge death toll. It will lead to an escalation and a widening of the war as other countries and organizations begin to join in this fight. This could spin out of control and result in a global conflict. But at a minimum, it will result in a massive blow to economic systems all over the world. Recall how important this area is to oil production. As long as the world needs oil, then this area will remain critical to that lifeblood of modern society, which is to say that it will be so for the foreseeable future. Everyone is aware of that, and yet our glorious leaders continue to try to drag us into an international property line dispute that's going to get millions of people killed. Now, I've contended that our leaders know that the game is up. They know that a collapse is coming, and they intend to drag us into something like this to cover up that collapse. They will use this as a way to control the slide and make the crash seem completely unrelated to their horrible choices and their criminal agenda. They will commit an evil to cover up another evil. So don't fall for this. Demand that our leadership stop this escalation. Teach and inform your friends and your family that this is all bullshit, and this conflict is not worth a single drop of American blood or a penny of our money. Let them fight it out on their own and take no sides. But we have to be vigilant out there as well. There is nothing keeping this conflict contained in the Middle East while we are talking like we support Israel in these actions. While our government is making these kinds of statements, we are open and vulnerable to activity. Friday is being called a day of jihad by some Palestinian leaders. So that could prove to be a problem for us. And it could prove to be a problem whether it's real or a false flag. So keep that in mind. Now that's all I got time for today, guys. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.